Brian, you did an excellent job of pulling that cap off without making too much noise.
I always wait until the last second.
It's perfect. Beyond, and hello everyone, my name is Jonathon Dornbush, and this is Podcast Beyond episode, a number that doesn't exist because this is sort of an in-between episode. We wanted to this year with, of course, the PS5, soon coming, we hope. We want to take a look back at the biggest PlayStation 4 exclusives and really dive back into what we loved, what we think could be better, and what we hope the life for them will be in the next generation of games. I'm joined this week by Max Scoville.
It's episode 0 Dawn.
You're right. I should have said that. That's
Beyond episode 0 Dawn.
Beyond
Hello.
episode 0 Dawn. I can't wait for episode 1 Dawn. Also joined by elderly Irish woman Lucy O'Brien. Hello.
Top of the morning to you. I hate
Too early
myself.
for that
Oh
noise.
boy. And Brian Altano.
Hello.
Hello. Thank you all so much for joining me for this episode.
Don't
As we have alluded to, we're going to be discussing Horizon Zero Dawn this week as Lucy adjusts her seat. You doing okay there?
What are you doing over there?
Surprise adjusted it too low. Ignore me.
We're going to be moving our chairs around a lot. We're also going to be talking about Horizon. As we're recording this today, it worked out it is the 3rd anniversary of that game. It came out in 2017. So we'll be taking a look back. I've been playing it all the way through for the first time. I sort of dropped off halfway through when it first came out, but we'll be
Was that because of Zelda?
It was because of everything that year.
Right.
It just was like a very busy year, especially with the Switch launch in general. So I always meant to go back to it, and I'm finally trying to platinum it and everything. But we'll go back, take a look at everything, take a look at your comments as well. We have a ton of input from the Podcast Beyond Facebook group as well as the Podcast Beyond YouTube community. So thank you all to everyone who wrote in their comments. We'll definitely be reading some on the show this week. But I thought we could kick off the show because we happen to fortuitously have Lucy here. And Lucy, of course, originally reviewed the game.
Yes.
Lucy,
feels like a million years ago.
Do you
but yes,
remember
I
what
did.
you gave it?
I think it was a 9.3.
You were correct. It was a 9.3.
All right.
I wanted to read off your verdict to start off the show. Across a vast and beautiful open world, Horizon Zero Dawn juggles many moving parts with polish and finesse. Its main activity, combat, is extremely satisfying thanks to the varied design and behaviors of machine creatures that roam its lands, each of which needs to be taken down with careful consideration. Though side questing could have been more imaginative, its missions are compelling thanks to a central mystery that led me down a deep rabbit hole to a genuinely surprising and moving conclusion.
Oh, nice work, me.
Yeah, you did pretty well. And so I want to...
Ugh, I hate hearing my past writing.
At least you didn't have to hear your VO. That's one of my least favorite.
That was good. That was very good.
It was very well done.
I think you nailed it.
I loved your review, and I think you did really capture so much what makes the game work and what it could do better, especially in the next going. But so I wanted to start, I think, on what we all can sort of universally agree is one of the best aspects of it, and it is that combat, that hunting, tracking down the machine creatures, robot dinosaurs, we call them, even though they're not all dinosaurs, I know. But the process of picking them apart, figuring out what weapons you need to use, and that slow, methodical process of hunting them down. I think we can all agree that is easily the best, coolest part of this game,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So good. And it's, it's one of those games where you're left a bit breathless after those, especially like climactic encounters.
Yeah.
Like you messaged me just the other day because what were you fighting?
Thunderjaw.
A Thunderjaw.
So,
and yeah.
Yeah, I had never fought, I got pretty far into the game, but I had never fought a Thunderjaw.
That's a T-Rex, right?
It's more the like Stegosaurus, I guess, like sort of T-Rex meets.
Okay.
Yeah, it's
very large.
They gave all the dinosaur robots cool nicknames, and they're like, they sometimes describe them, like it's a Glinthawk, or like a Thunderjaw, and I'm like, well, that's most dinosaurs.
Yeah.
They have like big mouths.
So that guy. So yeah, he's a mix of a couple dinosaurs.
Yeah, but he's a big boy.
The
He's a big
collector's
boy.
edition.
Yes, the collector's edition one, and so it's the biggest land robot dinosaur that you can fight, and I hadn't in the first game, and it's one of those things where you see it in the wild, you probably come across it before you're even near level enough to fight it.
Which I love. I love when games do that. Like when you're just traversing across, FromSoft games do this really well as well.
Yep.
You're just traversing across the landscape and you can see a giant thing in the distance. And you know that you are way too under level to take it on, but you know it's going to be there. It's coming for you.
Right.
Yeah, it's almost like I remember seeing it, and you can use Aloy's focus to zoom in and sort of look at enemies. But the first time you do, you're probably at a far enough distance where you can't even check in on it. Like it's so far that you're just kind of like, oh, I have no idea what I could face here. And so you could face one in the wild. You can face one in one of the cauldrons, which is the first time I fought one. So it was an even more enclosed space. And so it is like, good luck. You have a very small space to fight this giant creature who takes up most of it. And it was, yeah, I was like, if I was on a seat, I would have been at the edge of my seat. Like, it was one of those just incredible fights that I love so much.
What were you sitting on?
I was laying down on the couch.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, so like I would have had to roll over on my side to be on the edge, which is not a great way to lay. But fighting those, I think what's so interesting is that every different robot dinosaur takes a different approach, that you really do need to use Aloy's full arsenal.
Yeah.
Do you guys, how, that combat obviously is now 3 years old. How do you feel like it stands the test of time compared to games that have come since, things like Monster Hunter World or God of War or Bloodborne? How do you think it sort of stands up to
I think it still kicks ass. I think it still stands on its own. Bloodborne obviously scales in a sort of different direction, and Monster Hunter even further in sort of getting into the like overtly obtuse territory where like in Monster Hunter you're like sharpening your sword in the middle of a fight. Bloodborne doesn't get that crazy, although there are times where there's weapon damage, especially when you're rolling in a new game +1 and 2 and stuff like that.
We made it like 7 minutes without talking about Bloodborne.
He brought it up.
Yeah, I brought it up.
Blame him.
I knew what I was doing.
And I think that the reason I liked this game a lot was it does a really good job of sort of balancing projectiles with hand-to-hand stuff. I remember specifically like being like, okay, I'm going to die if I get any closer to this thing, but I found this ridge with a rock and I'm going to hide behind it for 45 minutes and just like launch grenades at this thing's ass until it dies. And I did that and it worked. And I remember that being just as tense as boss fights where I'm, running underneath something's leg and groin and stabbing upwards to kill it. And so that's what I really like about this game. I think that's like probably the part where it shines the most. Is the combat, and I think it still kicks ass, especially like the Glinthawk stuff. When you're fighting stuff on the ground and there's stuff in the sky at the same time, that's a lot of games don't really get into that territory. Like a lot of third-person action games are sort of just like here's what you're fighting right here. Especially even Bloodborne, there isn't really a ton of stuff that's like up in the air.
No, even the birds are on the ground.
Yeah, especially them, right? Like they're just like blah, and they leap in the air. And so that's what I really liked about this game. That and the kind of the way the environment's scaled vertically, which would make it so you would be on the side of a cliff and all of a sudden Glinthawks would come out and you're like, okay, well, I'm on like a narrow path and I'm fighting 3 things in the sky at the same time, which is like pretty dynamic and a lot different than even like Zelda did just a few weeks later, I think that the combat in this game, specifically like when you're fighting something huge and you have to pick it apart, is the singular most impressive thing it does. I mean, obviously like it succeeds so well on a technical level, but I feel like it takes that concept that we're all familiar with of like a Zelda boss fight where one part of the boss starts flashing red and you're like, that's where I shoot it. And they're like, all right, well, what if some parts were blue and some parts were yellow? And also this isn't a boss, this is a regular enemy. Right. And there's 6 of them. And then there's 2 different flavors that have different parts. And that idea of having to sort of like pick it apart and, choose your strategy. And it's cool that they're doing this because it's within the sort of the conceit of a video game where it's a totally made up animal. You can kind of go nuts and play around there. It's not like you're fighting an actual dinosaur and be like, well, you got to shoot it in the gallbladder. It's like, no, this is a completely fantastic beast. Yep. And it might be weak against lightning or something. And so you have to take it on that front. I think when it really gets down to those moments of like, I mean, they're like emergent boss encounters almost, where they're not even bosses. It's just a Thunderjaw or a Fireclaw or a Deathbringer, or you've got the wiki open.
Yeah. Well, because I was trying to remember, later in the game you start to fight behemoths, and it is one of those things where it's like they have canisters on them that you can use with an elemental attack to weaken them, but you may also accidentally knock those canisters off and then you can't set them on fire, and so you have to come up with another approach. Like I think the dynamism to each individual robot having multiple ways that you can go at it, and so even if you make a mistake, there's still a glimmer of hope in a way.
But also the pieces of these animals being assets at the same time, like the stuff that you want to actually collect these things is really cool.
Oh, it's such a great gameplay loop. What I really love about the designs of the machines themselves is even when you are doing things like shooting off canisters off a behemoth's back, it's moving in a way that is extremely animalistic and feels like a very real creature. So you're never sort of thinking, okay, and then I will move here and shoot that off, and then I will move here, because it's moving in a very organic way and you never really can anticipate how it's going to move. Yeah. And I love that side of it. It always feels like you're taking down something that is alive.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, Matt.
I'm going to counter that and say one thing I absolutely hate in this game, which completely takes me out of the sort of organic experience, is the fact that you can basically turn on like the sort of Google Maps route where the animal's going to take. Like before you engage in combat and it totally, everything goes out the window. The fact that there's that whole thing where you're like, all right, what's the like what's the Metal Gear Solid guard loop? Like, what's their
Right.
route that
Yeah,
they're taking?
yeah,
Which just reminds me, like, this is a system.
Yeah,
And I love it when it's completely hectic and chaotic and you can't tell which direction things are going to go. But the fact that there's like, all right, well, where are you going to put your little mines?
Yeah, I would say there's only a couple enemies though that you can probably get in one kill, even when you're pretty leveled up. And so once you get them off that path, it is still like a good luck, because you could put 50 tripwires around that path, but if they see you, that path doesn't matter anymore. Once you get them out of that loop, it is so great to be able to be like, I'm going to put down these 7 tripwires here, and then I'm going to shoot this arrow that takes half of their armor off.
Right.
And then when they're confused, I'm going to shoot 5 electric bombs at them so I can stun them and then maybe hack them or maybe do a critical hit. Like, there is that just constant, it keeps you on your toes so constantly. And it's such a great thing about it. I do wish there was, like, I love that they obviously, looking forward to more scale in future sequels. I do love that there is a whole range of them, of everything from the small watchers to ones that you're not really fighting, like the tall necks.
Tall necks are just beautiful.
Yeah, I wish there was almost more of them in the game. Like, I know we're all sort of tired of towers in games.
Like them, you should play Death Stranding.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they're very Ubisofty, the tall necks, but I love them nonetheless, just for the sheer size. And one of the reasons I'm so excited to play a Horizon 2 on the PlayStation 5 is to see how much bigger they can go with these things, considering next-gen technology.
Yeah.
I hope they take a cue from Shadow of the Colossus and really just make these encounter, like these should be enemies as well as environments.
Right.
Like, I would love to see much more. Like, I guess there's some parts where you kind of get on them, but not really. Like, that's less of the focus. Whereas you look at Shadow of the Colossus, or Dragon's Dogma did this really well, where larger enemies, you're like, I'm going to get up there and stab you in the eyeball.
Yeah. And again, what Shadow of the Colossus does so well is it's very, you sort of, you know that there's a way to get up there, but you always feel like you're sort of making it up, and you're always like sort of grabbing on bits of it, like bits of its alive fur that's also grass, and it's just like it's so, again, it's like a sort of scrambling encounter that feels so organic.
One of my favorite things with one of the tall necks specifically was that you, instead of just like climbing up it like you do every Ubisoft tower, you had to basically traverse this giant cliff and then wait for it to walk
I remember that.
kind of parallel with you, and then dive off the top and land on its flat head, and then it would basically give you surveillance of the area. I thought that was so cool. Yeah. Yeah. I thought that was like such a cool way of handling the classic Ubisoft tower thing.
Yeah, the way that they blend those into the environment is a really smart addition to it, instead of just trying to like find the right place on their leg to hit. Like, you really do need to be able to climb up them. But I agree, I would love to see a mix of that climbing and the fights wrapped together into some very large enemies that we'll have to tackle. But I think that is a good transition to talk about one of the things which obviously it did get comparisons to, because it's hard to ignore the fact that Breath of the Wild came out 2 weeks after it, and that game was built on the fact of climb anything, go anywhere, you can touch everything, and scale it. Here, pathing is very specific to get around in terms of verticality. Usually it's ledges that are hinted at by either white or yellow dust,
it's
or
like
ash
Uncharted.
or it's very much in the vein of other Sony first-party games, but there was a limitation to it. And as much as I love this beautiful world, I found myself so often being like, where does the geometry have sort of a footstep that I can fake and do a 50 hops up to get
I did
somewhere?
so much of that in this game. So much. I swear I spent 15 hours total
hopping?
just like shimmying up a mountainside that I wasn't supposed to go up. The amount of times I would pull up the mini map in that game and just sort of be like, I have to get here, so I should go here. And then I'd get there and I'd be like, damn it. I spent 15 minutes climbing up it, and then you'd have to go all the way around. And
The funniest thing about going back to it and realizing, hey, Death Stranding's running in this engine, is doing that and being like, that's the gameplay loop for Death Stranding.
Yeah.
Is looking at your minimap and being like, can I get up that cliff there? Can I walk around it?
Yeah, and here I think it was most apparent to me, because I've been going a lot more for as many of the collectibles as possible since I'm trying to platinum it, is the Banuk figures, which are often at very high precipices, and they're very often out of the way. And even if you can see an entire cliff face, you may have no idea where to go, because it's actually around the corner on the cliff face, and it's hidden by a bunch of trees. And so it was one of those things where I would, like you, Brian, like spend spend 20 minutes trying to hop up things and then just see Aloy crash to her death because I accidentally hit a too smooth piece of the environment.
Yeah, and then sometimes maybe you were standing on like a tunnel that started half a mile earlier that led to a cave that was beneath you that had the coffee mug you were looking for.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, but you didn't really know until you exhausted every possible option.
Yes, yeah, and it's one of those things that I think in a sequel, obviously fixing terrain-wise would be one of the biggest improvements. I love to see being able to get around more of it. I think, Max, to what you were speaking of, we've seen the Decima engine now be used in another game that is all about traversal. Are there lessons you want Horizon to take from Death Stranding, good or bad?
Yeah, I mean, I think that Death Stranding was definitely like a gorgeously rendered open world that had like a very tactile engagement with it. It just was kind of empty and there wasn't enough stuff to do, whereas Horizon is almost the opposite problem, where I think it is more successful as a video game than it is as a believable open world. So if you manage to kind of meet halfway there and have a game that is like really grounded and like tactile traversal coupled with like, you know, enemies that give you a real challenge, you've got something very cool there. But my issue with Horizon specifically is that just when I'm like completely enamored by the world and being like, this is completely beautifully rendered, it does something just inherently video gamey that pulls me out of it. Like looking at the map, it is kind of unabashedly like showing, it does the RPG thing where it's like, here be monsters level 7 to 9, and you're like, okay, well, I know that I can't go there yet or whatever. You know, like there's that. It kind of. It doesn't gatekeep, but it very much is like, okay, these are, you know, your fast pass can
guides you a little bit too much.
And it's less of like, here's an entire cohesive ecosystem and more like, here's a bunch of different arenas that are strung together by various means of getting to and fro.
Right.
So that's like one of my favorite parts of this game is how unabashedly sort of Super Mario World it is. Like they're like, here's the fire zone and here's the ice zone and they're all like interconnected. There's no logic to it. Like you just cross over like a hill and all of a sudden the entire world's covered in fire and lava and there's like fire beasts everywhere and you're like, that's a lot, and you turn around and you're back in like grassy peaceful town. It's totally ridiculous, whereas like Death Stranding was just kind of like drab and gray, and then like there'd be moments where you're like, oh, it's a little town or like a hole.
Oh, I'm not saying get rid of the fire area. I think like that part, that like elemental side of video gaminess and being like, hey, what, should the dinosaurs shoot lasers? Yeah, screw it, why not? I'm totally in support of that. I just mean like structurally speaking, it felt very much like it felt like a little bit disingenuous as far as being a fully open world, you know?
Right, right. Which is odd because they gatekeep fast travel from you for a significant portion of that game.
Yeah,
so they want you to explore it like it's an open world.
Fast traveling is one of the weirdest aspects in that game because the first time around I had no idea there was the better version of it because you can collect travel packs all throughout. And I don't know if it was a post-launch edition or not, but you collect the travel packs and then there is a just infinite travel pack you can buy.
Yeah.
And it only costs 50 shards and a couple like fox skins. It's not that expensive.
But even without that, I mean, I found by the end, sort of the in-game time, like I had so many of those travel packs. They're not hard.
No, it's not. It's just an odd thing to sort of.
Yeah, it was a bit half-baked as a premise.
I have like friends that don't read IGN every day, and they were playing that game for hours and hours. Yeah. And they were like, yeah, it's really good. I just hate walking everywhere. And I'm like, oh, you can like quick travel. Did you know that? And they're like, no. Because that's like kind of, it's not like really in your face, but it's not really buried either. It's just sort of like, it's kind of a subtle option. Then it only pops up after you've been in that world for a while. And by then you might already have a rhythm down of how you get everywhere. And you do get vehicles. You get that funny horse with
the Striders. You can ride. Yeah. I would love to be able to ride a Glint Hawk in the sequel.
Oh, I want to be able to ride everything.
Something flying.
Sounds really rude. I understand what Max is saying. One of the things that I would like to see in a sequel, and you know, this is relating back to my point in that conclusion in the review about side quests not being particularly interesting. I just want the world to be a bit more like the world outside. The machines themselves are fascinating. I love the environments. I love like the sort of minute to minute traversal in Horizon, but what I didn't particularly adore is the sort of like the towns and the people. Like I want more interesting stories to be told within the larger story.
Yeah, so
because that goes a long way to creating a cohesive world that feels very lived in and real.
Yeah, I do want to get to the overarching plot of the game and the story, and we'll spoiler warn that when we get there. But I do want to talk about essentially the world around you that you have to explore when it comes to side quests and the people and everything, because at the beginning of the game it does set up a much more like story focused, almost linear game, like when you're first starting out with Aloy's story, and then it opens up and it's like, go to these towns and maybe you'll find a side quest and maybe you'll just have to go kill an enemy for someone. Like the side questing never really feels like it's that consequential to what you're doing.
No.
It does have that sort of like, hey, you're on this very important path to find out something hugely important for the world, but what if you got 50 fox skins first? And it does have that dichotomy to it.
And flirt with people with no real consequence.
Yeah.
Remember how flirtatious Aloy was?
So the flirting in that game, I want to talk about
I
that.
guess that's your game, Lucy. I don't.
Hey, if given the option, I'm always a sex pest.
Put that on a shirt.
Yeah, the flirting in the game I do want to get to. There are a couple characters that it feels like they are pushing Aloy to have a like romantic interest in. Specifically, I could not tell what they were trying to do with Erend, who's sort of like the main male character you interact with mostly. But there are some characters in the game where I'm like, oh, she has so much more chemistry with them. Can we have them be part of the main story? Like, why are they only in this town for 10 minutes? There is a weird thing, but yeah, it's surprisingly flirty.
Like, I liked it. Like, I'm not complaining.
Yeah.
I just it was again one of those sort of things where it like fast travel, where it sort of didn't quite feel fully realized. It didn't really have a real, well, it wasn't.
You have dialogue choices,
well built, but there was no consequence.
Yeah, there's no consequence.
I mean, which is fine, because I understand that that sort of lets you tailor a protagonist to your sort of liking on a superficial level. But yeah, there was no consequence.
Yeah, and there's no, so there is essentially, because it's tied to some trophies, so of course I've been following for it, there are some side quests you need to complete in order to get certain allies to appear at a final fight. But you don't really know that going into those stories. A couple of them I sought out because I wanted to, and when I got to them, I'm like, oh, this is one of the important side quests to the game. Like, it feels so superfluous, so unnecessary to the main plot. I don't know why it's pushing me here.
Yeah.
And yeah, how did you all feel about like before we get to like Aloy's story and all of that, how did you feel about the world that they built when it comes to like these competing tribes, the Karja, the Shadow Karja, the Asaram workers? I mean, does any of that really like linger in your mind as something interesting?
It makes me so mad.
Why?
I don't, it's just, some people obviously get into it. It's just like, it's a world that I had the hardest time like buying into. I think it was just, it's like they really just and I appreciate all the color and all like the different, like there's some great art direction in there and there's some really cool stuff, but as far as like grounding it at all or making it feel like remotely like believable, it just, something didn't stick the landing for me. And it was, I think a lot of it is how realistic the game is visually. If it had been like a little bit cartoony or like kind of like, I mean, you look at, I don't know, Borderlands or Breath of the Wild or something that has that like kind of cel-shaded look to it. That's never an issue for me there. That's never, I have no problem with that whatsoever if it's like a kind of, wackadoo story. But the fact that they've got these gorgeously rendered, like photorealistic environments, and then I'm just like, I'm poking holes in this. This doesn't add up. I don't like it. So.
Yeah. I mean, like, it wasn't particularly compelling. During my first playthrough, when I was reviewing it, I was so impressed by how Ashley Birch managed to, who's Aloy's voice actress, managed to sort of sell a lot of nonsense with her performance. You know what I mean? Like, she did such a good job, and Aloy was I really liked her as a character, that like all of that sort of stuff didn't really bother me. I was just like, sure. But I was always interested in her and what she had to say.
I weirdly wouldn't even go that far. I was there for the world and for the combat, and like that makes me sound like an idiot, which is fine.
I mean it's a game that is sold on those two things.
Yeah, and it's sort of like when I was watching, what was it, the 2014 Godzilla movie, where like the monster would come out and then they would close a door on him, and then it would just be a bunch of scientists yelling at each other, and I was like, that's fine, but that's not really why I'm here.
Yeah.
Like I'll funnel through all of this stuff to get to what's next, which is always just like somebody would hand me a quest, which would get me back on the road, being where I wanted to be. And this is someone who did like tons of side stuff in that game. When you said like farming fox pelts, I did that for like hours and hours.
Oh,
and
yeah.
hours.
Yeah.
Like I remember specifically one field running up and down, just beating the crap out of animals with a stick to get their clothes or whatever to make more guns. I forget.
And it feels not great compared to taking down like one of the vicious, stalkers that are attacking you,
Right.
like of the robots. When you have to take down a poor fox, it's like, I'm sorry, I need this skin for armor.
Or like 30 of them.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then every now and then, like one of those raptors would be like, are you killing foxes? I'm gonna get you.
Yeah.
But then I'd be funneled into these towns up these like sort of winding staircases and looking at the mini map, figuring out which of the 6 adjacent shops have the exact thing I'm looking for.
Every shop is identical.
Yeah. And then it would just be this close-up shot of this guy being like, hey, Alloy, what are you looking for? And I was like, not you. I don't want to. Like, it's all fine.
Yeah.
It's all totally okay for world-building stuff. But, I wanted to just get back out there and kick some ass.
Yeah, and ultimately, these are small things, because what Brian said is true, is that it is a game that the entire premise is the world and the combat.
Right.
And it's like everything else is, if it's, it could be better, but it's not, it definitely didn't break anything for me.
No, for sure.
And when I sort of think about it, for a first game, for a new IP, it was incredible.
Yeah, when you consider that this is Guerrilla's first game after a string 5 kill zones, including the PSP game and then Shadowfall, the PS4 launch title, when you consider that they were focused all on those and then opened up to this entirely new genre for them, an entirly new focus.
Exactly, but you think about Assassin's Creed, you think about the first Watch Dogs, you think about like all of those games, like they are, they were good effort, and then really stuck the landing on the sequels.
I think this is such a better first.
I feel like Horizon Zero Dawn was so excellent from the get-go. That's exactly, the sequel is going to blow our socks off.
Yeah. My biggest detriment to this experience, playing through it all again right now, has been the storytelling of it, but it's not a thing, like you were saying, that has deterred me from wanting to keep investing in this world, because I do think there is a lot that they could elevate on an interesting story level. I think the problem is, sort of like Brian, you were saying, everything about the storytelling and the characters is just so stiff. Like, it is always, those cutscenes are always, a person stands completely still and talks to you mostly about exposition.
Yep.
And you respond asking a question. They tell you more exposition. Now you go off to quest. And that's it. Like, other than Aloy, even when they try with Erend again to give you an investment in his character, often he's just telling you facts about the Karja and the Shadow Karja and all these things, and you're like, I don't really know why I should care, because Aloy is being introduced to all of this right now, and I have so much else going on that it doesn't really hold weight with me. And so you get through all of these conversations, and honestly, by the end, I've just been clicking through so I can get back into the combat.
Yeah.
And I rarely ever do that in games, especially games that I love the concept of this world. I just don't think they sell it in the dialogue.
One of the biggest sort of issues in games, I think, is like in movies, there's show don't tell, where it's like, if you're using a visual medium to tell a story, don't just have somebody rattling off dialogue. When you're having an interactive visual medium and you've got somebody just standing there giving you like a tour guide speech, or even worse, it's just a WAV file or an email you've got to read from somebody. Like, I don't know, find a better way to integrate that into your storytelling.
Yeah,
it's tricky. Obviously, there's a lot of moving parts, and I don't want to just be dismissive of how they're doing it. But
I was going to say the one opposite to that I've found really in this experience, the one time I have enjoyed Aloy having conversations with people is with Lance Reddick's character Silence, which I'll hold off spoilers on him. But I think the reason those conversations work is because, at least for a large majority of the game, he's only talking to Aloy through the focus, so you don't see him. So it forces the game to have to be dynamic while this is going on.
He also has like one of the most captivating voices.
Exactly. That doesn't hurt. That
like, please go watch The Wire and then also watch Fringe, because that dude, if you played that game and you're like, wow, he's a good actor, go watch those things.
Yeah, he is amazing, and so like that definitely helps. But it is one of those things where it forces the game, when they're not showing him, to have to be doing something, because the camera isn't just sitting on Aloy standing there listening, and so it enhances the storytelling simply by the fact that it has to be doing something.
Yeah.
Which so often the conversations don't. And so I do see the blueprint for where it can go from there.
Yeah.
But the thing I do want to jump off from there is into the story, and we will be going a little bit into spoilers. So if you haven't played through the game, spoiler warning for the next bit. I'll wave my hands like crazy for the video version when we're out of the spoiler territory.
you had 3 years to play it.
Exactly. But I just want to ask out in the open whether you played through the whole thing when it first came out, whether you've played a little bit now, whether, whatever your variance on it is, what can you tell me about the main plot?
I remember liking it. I remember I can tell. Okay.
This isn't to be dismissive, because I do want to get to a part that I like, but I think there's an issue with its pacing.
Okay, this is a bit drunk history because, like, I'm not drunk, but I don't really remember everything. so you end up discovering that a whole bunch of people previous to the machines taking over had like chosen who would survive or something, and there was an underground bunker where the survivors sort of were, and Aloy's mum was one of them, I think, or she was a scientist or something like that, and basically they all died, and then humanity was reborn again, and Aloy discovered that secret at the end. That's what I think happened. I remember finding the ending quite satisfying. I just don't remember the specifics.
Please, someone animate that. Very close on a lot of it. So yeah, I will say the ending is where I've gotten invested in the story, because so much of the game is, and I forget what I wanted to compare it to, but it is this whole thing of like Aloy doesn't understand what's happening and she's trying to find out, and it just keeps getting obfuscated from her. And then finally when she finds out, I'm like, oh, I kind of am into this, but it's now too late in the game and they have to rush through it all.
Yeah.
But essentially, so Aloy was born as a recreation of Dr. Elizabeth Sobek. She was born with her DNA.
Right. Yes.
In this post-apocalyptic world, because a virus spread through all of the robots that essentially caused them to want to wipe out humanity. And so they decided, we don't have enough time as humans to figure out this cure, so we're going to let AI figure out this cure. And in the meantime, we're just all going to die out. And then once life can exist again, the AI will rebirth humanity essentially and give them the tools to go out and recreate society. But if they get it wrong, there is a program within this larger AI program called Gaia, called Hades, who will destroy everything.
Yeah.
If it goes wrong. And in this game, Hades essentially has decided, yeah, it's broken, I'm going to go kill everyone. And we don't know why. And it wants to kill Aloy because it has Elizabeth's DNA, and it knows that Elizabeth helped create it, the safeguards that would stop it. How you doing, Brian?
It's a lot. I beat this game.
Yeah.
I remember this. I hadn't remembered this until this came up again.
So all of the Gaia, it's called Hades earlier on because of Silence, but you don't learn any of the Gaia Hades stuff until the last 3 or 4 missions, and how Gaia actually had 12 different, obviously god-based names, programs, part of its AI that were set free when Hades went rogue, but you don't know who set it free or why it was set free. And essentially the game teases Silence is trying to go after who set off Hades in the first place, and that essentially sets up the sequel.
Again, this makes me sound like a huge idiot, but this is not why I'm here.
Yeah.
All this stuff it's great. So it's sort of in the background.
It's also not part of the game until very late, in a major way.
And I liked, but for me, I know it sounds ridiculous that I'm defending something that I can't even really properly remember, but
that's most nostalgia.
Yeah, right. There was that, the mystery was teased throughout the game, and I was like, well, this better actually be interesting and satisfying in some way to me, because you've been teasing it for how many hours. And I did quite like the ending. It was slightly, even though it was over the top video gamey nonsense, I found it quite Twilight Zone-y, and I enjoyed that. It was weird and interesting, and I loved going into that area at the end where you sort of discover the truth. I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, you essentially get to go into what is the All Mother, which they've been praising as their god, and it is just the AI incubation area where humans were kept. And that's where you find out everything, and it is exposition central, and you're just going through exposition and listening to audio and all seeing cutscenes play out. But it's all so much more interesting because it's at least finally telling you why things are happening. Mm-hmm. And I do think it sets up a lot of interesting paths for the sequel to go to story-wise. I just hope they don't do the same thing of if it's going to be part of the game, I don't want them to downplay it for the first 3 quarters.
Yeah, make it important. Let's hear your ideas.
About where it goes?
Yeah.
Well, so there's one bit, and maybe I haven't explored every little bit of lore because there's a lot of data points to pick up, but I love the idea that all of these different bits of Gaia were set free. All these different Greek gods essentially were set free. And where do those AI programs go from there? What havoc they can cause, what aid they can help with, because essentially at the end of the game, obviously it implies something is trying to cause Hades's, devastating plans. So what does that larger force want, and what other AI could they get? How could it be interesting in a way that isn't just it's corrupting the animals? Like, what else can it do? Because you don't name all of these characters after gods for no reason. Like, they are going to be extremely powerful. And I don't think it's going to suddenly be God of War where you're hunting down the 8 programs who are also gods. But
right.
I do think there is a way to blend the like human aspect of like Sylens wanting to find out who is the like force behind this, like who may be the person behind this, as well as what can these crazy AI programs do to set off further advancements in the creatures you're having to fight. I think there's a balance you can strike there.
Hope Guerrilla is paying attention.
Can I pitch mine?
Revise your script.
One issue I had with it is landlocked. You're in like Colorado. I'd love to see this game move to an island chain, and you can have all sorts of different environments as well as aquatic stuff.
Ooh,
and I think airborne stuff would be incredibly cool. That's how you kind of spice things up in a mechanical sense. Have some gigantic beasts walking around, and it's like, sing some Shadow of the Colossus stuff where you've got to like swoop in on a pterodactyl and think like a walking Far Cry outpost that's like crawling with other monsters on top of it.
I love it.
Also, Aloy's a great character, but what if you got to create your own character and hang out with Aloy?
I like it.
Like in Metal Gear Solid 2.
It would make a lot of sense because there are these AI incubation areas. Like, essentially, there were people being fostered by the AI, so it is not crazy to think, create your character, they're born out of this AI area, and they were forgotten about.
We've talked about this before, but I'd be amazed if they sort of like pushed her to the side, because she somehow became like one of their big icons.
They positioned her as a big icon pretty early on in the piece.
Yeah.
But I think she deserves it. I think she's a great character. She's an entertaining character to be in the shoes of for 40 hours.
I do like Max's idea, though, of having her there, but making her more of like a Sully.
Yeah. I mean, Solid Snake is still in the Metal Gear Solid 2 box art. You don't play as him for most of the game.
Right. Which I think weren't some people, I mean, that was like
Some people were cross about that.
Oh, a lot of people were cross about that.
I don't know. Maybe have an option. You could also, like, we've seen the weird strand system in Decim Engine with Death Stranding where people are helping each other out and doing stuff. Like, what if you kicked that up a notch and added more multiplayer where it's, you call in a friend, a la Bloodborne, and you guys team up to take down the big Stegosaurus or what have you.
Well, I did want to ask,
building grappling hooks or water slides or whatever.
As we are getting into like what we want, do you want there to be a multiplayer aspect to this, whether it is the strand system of like a single player game with multiplayer aspects being put into it, or a more multiplayer focused mode? Do you want to see either of those?
I like the ring a bell, phone a friend element.
I like the ring a bell, phone a friend thing over Monster Hunter World's more multiplayer focused. Because for so much of Monster Hunter World, like it's really, it makes a massive difference if you have several people helping you. I think that there's still something much more satisfying about and kind of haunting about taking down those creatures by yourself.
Yeah,
for sure.
And I think, yes, if you really are stuck and you can call someone in, then awesome. But I don't think it should be like you should really. We shouldn't be encouraged to play co-op the whole time.
No, I don't want it to be like Division, Destiny raid stuff, where it's like 7 people are fighting the same monster over and over for the chance that he'll drop an ankle bracelet.
I think given how much sort of color-coded loot there is in this game, where you're like, oh, should I switch my blue thing to a purple thing because it's got plus 17 instead of plus 13, like they could very easily, metaphorically flip a switch and basically make it one of those shared world experiences. But I think that would be kind of an affront to everybody who was like, yeah, I'll play this single player offline open world game.
Yeah, I think it'd be antithetical to what they were creating with this game. I could see room for multiplayer aspects, whether it is that like phone a friend thing. I do feel like it is, perhaps, Lucy, I agree, I don't want like the world to sort of require you to have 3 extra people to help you take down some of these robot dinosaurs, but I could see it being a thing of like a really great horde mode could work in this game.
Like a separate mode.
Yeah, a separate mode where it's like you and 3 friends can take down increasingly tough waves of enemies that are maybe have like difficulty spikes or different abilities, or suddenly fire is something they're resistant to instead of weak, like things like that.
I mean, Horizon is like one of the big PlayStation exclusives of this generation that sort of joined that portfolio that proved that single player games don't always need multiplayer, because they all sold incredibly well and they were reviewed incredibly well. Like throwing that in there as like an option, or like the phone a friend thing to fight a big boss, I'm cool with that. I don't want to see this move into like a shared world Division style thing. I think that's just like too cumbersome.
No, neither. And I think I might have brought this up because I sound like such a wanker, but I think I might have brought this up before. But Steven Spielberg described the original Jurassic Park as being like the tone that he was striking was horror and wonder. And I felt both those things when playing Horizon Zero Dawn.
Yeah.
And I think that adding a whole bunch of people scrambling around would completely strip away at least the horror part of it, the daunting, oh my God, I've got to take that thing down myself. And then of course the rapturous joy that comes from taking a thing down by yourself.
I'm cool with scripted NPCs rolling into the hunt with you and then getting torn apart.
Yeah.
You know, like the lawyer in Jurassic Park.
Gerardo?
We already had the ability to hack the dinosaurs and have them be your friends or your car or whatever. But like, what if they were like, you get like a special one that you can upgrade and really like that becomes like almost
Right. Your Yoshi.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But he's got a clock radio in his head or whatever.
Chloe Price from the YouTube comments actually said to combine a few things that they enjoyed about the game. I have to give it up to Aloy's voice actress, Ashley Birch. She's done an incredible job. I loved every aspect of the game. Only drawbacks were the fighting humans and bandit camps got repetitive, and I think the melee combat was weak, and the main villain was dumb. For Horizon Zero Dawn 2, I want to see Aloy with cyber pets for the next game. Maybe visit the Forbidden West, a place we hear a lot about, but we want to go there also. Also, spoilers, F. Ted Farrow for damning humanity. Yeah.
Is that a politician?
I'm into like a sort of...
He's the guy who led the...
He's like the head. He's the one who made all the Deathbringers or
basically,
whatever.
yeah.
Taking a kind of robot Donkey Kong Country approach where like you go into one territory and there's a different rideable animal than there is over here, and you can bring them from area to area would be really interesting. But knowing that some of them are indigenous to certain environments, and then going hunting them down, hacking them, and then they're yours forever, part of your like sort of GTA garage.
Yeah.
You know, like once you park it once, it's in there, you can summon it forever.
Yeah. I would love to see though even more complexity to the different robot types interacting with each other, and whether some can be allies with each other, whether some hate each other, that sort of like making the environment more complex in that way would be great. I think I'd love to see, Marco Ramirez from the YouTube group said, a climbing mechanic and more robust customization options. On the climbing bit, what I've been thinking about while I've been playing a lot is one of my favorite things to do is the rope launcher, which lets you tie down enemies. I would love if you could mod the rope launcher to almost be like, Max, you were saying, a grappling hook, or just, there were so many times where I was climbing up a thing and I'm like, man, it'd be great if I could just launch a rope right there and swing to something.
Yeah.
Like, it just seems so obviously part of the world.
This is an easily disproven statement, but I don't think a video game has ever been made worse with the addition of a grappling hook.
Yeah.
That is
I agree.
Fun ass mechanic,
It's so
especially
fun.
if there's big cliffs everywhere and large brontosauruses with radar dishes on their heads.
That'd be wonderful. Yeah,
Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
on grappling hooks. Yeah, that's one of the biggest elements of the game I would want to see updated. Is there anything else that we all feel really could be enhanced from this game that we felt was a little bit lacking? I know we've talked a bit about story.
I think we've covered the bases.
Yeah, I feel like that's some of the biggest stuff we want to see. As I pull up some more comments, though, I did want to ask, now that we're in 2020, we talked about this game a bit before, when do you think we're seeing Horizon 2? As we said, today is the 3rd anniversary of the game. Guerrilla has been silent since The Frozen Wilds, which came out later that year in 2017. Other than that,
I want to see it 2 years into the PS5's life cycle. That's when I want to see it.
I want a teaser trailer this year. I want the general population at large to have some reasons to spend $500-$600 this fall, knowing that they're buying into a system that's going to be kicking ass for a long time. Which they should know either way, but
no. And I also think that, like, you know, if the rumored 9.2 PS5 teraflops are true, it's going to have to rely on a lot more than raw horsepower in order to stand out from the Xbox Series X, which is obviously going to be an incredibly powerful and expensive machine. So I think that if we look at things like a lower price point and a fantastic array of first-party games, that'll be enough to you know, to sell the system to people.
This game came out a couple weeks before Breath of the Wild did, and through, you know, the idea of them being similar in several ways and also just being big exclusive open world games where you fight things and ride horse-shaped objects, they were sort of forever connected in that way, especially because Breath of the Wild let you climb everything and Aloy couldn't really do that. We already got a teaser for Breath of the Wild 2. Right? That's all I'm really asking for Horizon. Just a sort of like hero shot of Aloy walking into a field. You see a silhouette of something very massive, and then boom, Horizon Zero Dawn 2 currently in development. Guerrilla Games logo.
That's all it needs.
That's
I mean, we just need just a teaser of anything from Sony at this point.
Yeah. I'm not really looking for like a Death Stranding style cycle where it's at every trade show for the next 5 years.
Here's a 9-minute
clips
trailer
of the ending, and then and then 4 years later you play the game.
I definitely don't need that. But just like having an idea that like we're working on this, it's going to be a PlayStation 5 exclusive. Pre-order with pride or whatever.
Brian, to cross the streams with your NVC knowledge, of course, how close do you think this will come out to Breath of the Wild 2?
3 weeks before.
3 weeks before? From the Facebook group, Joshua said, during a blizzard where I couldn't leave my house for days, I started and beat the game in 5 days, 52 hours just a few months ago, and damn, what an experience.
Yeah.
It's not a bad way to experience this game. I have found as I've been playing, it is so much fun to just get lost in that world and stumble across a herd of striders and then find a fox to skin, but then also find a few extra missions to pick up and just keep going through.
I remember specifically going all the way, I think it was to like the lower left corner of the map where there's sort of just like docks and like this kind of beach town, and how sprawling it was, and there were just like enemies camped out everywhere, and just being like, this is awesome. Like it doesn't even feel like this feels off the beaten path, but it's like, rewarded me for finding it. In the same way, like in the upper right of Breath of the Wild, there was that big labyrinth. I was like, man, there's just like really cool stuff and like tucked away in the corners of these games. I want more stuff like that.
Moving on, just to do a little bit of back and forth of some of the opinions. Rob from the YouTube group said, I've tried the game 3 times. Probably the max amount of time I spent was 15 hours or so. It looks gorgeous. The combat feels satisfying and tight, and I like open world games. Each time I tried it, though, I was just never really pulled in or compelled so much to keep coming back or keep playing. The story and characters felt flat, and I thought the acting was bland. I wish so many times to be on the bandwagon for this game, and I'll probably try it again during a gaming drought, but I'm actually not hopeful the experience will be any different for me.
I think that's totally fair. I mean, whatever you experienced, if it didn't grab you by then, it probably won't for the next 40 hours.
I want to say something like I don't want to seem like I'm being too negative on this game, because obviously we're here to sort of celebrate it and praise its achievements, but also point out its shortcomings. But like, so much of what makes me critical about it is because it is such an incredible, like, it's so close in so many ways. Like, there's so many things it does incredibly right, and then a few things that are like, it almost got me, And I'm dying to see what they do with the second one, because it's like, it shows, it's also like, it is a technical masterpiece,
right?
Like, this is one of the first games I've put on I got a 4K TV since going back into it, and like, the HDR in this game is stunning.
It's beautiful.
I was criticized in the YouTube comments for saying this, but I will say it again. Horizon Zero Dawn was the moment where I was like, next gen has arrived for me. Like, the PlayStation 4 has arrived. Like that's what I felt at the time, because it felt like it was fully realized.
I think I remember there was a point in my mentally where I was like, Uncharted 4 is the best looking PlayStation game, and then I played this and I was like, looks like that, but it's an open world game. This is the one.
Yeah. Horizon, we didn't talk about this too much, but Horizon, I still think playing it now still holds up. It is more beautiful than most games coming out these days even. And it is the first game that sucked me into and really sold me on the concept of photo modes.
Oh my God.
And like, I've spent, I think, as much time playing the game as I have in photo modes, because it is so much fun. And looking back on it, it's actually a very basic photo mode, like compared to things that have come since with God of War and especially Spider-Man's photo mode. It is so much less complex of a photo mode. The game is just so photogenic itself that it is hard to find yourself in a place where you can't take a great screenshot.
Your photos have been it's been really cool seeing what you've done in there.
Thank you. It's been so much fun. Like, it's been one of those things where I'm like, okay, I've played through a bit of this. I kind of have a grasp on where some fun parts of the world are. And it's been like a nature photography quest of like, where can I go for great shots?
I mean, that right there could be a mechanic.
Yeah.
Like, how wild would it be if there was an entire like side quest that was like Pokemon Snap with these robot dinosaurs? And I know we're just kind of
you just sold me on a game.
Like, oh, this is what I want for Christmas. This is Super Mario Bros. 4, and they can fly this time. But like,
I mean, in terms of like weird quests that NPCs in town could put you on, that would be awesome.
That'd be an amazing quest.
I was like, what's a camera? I've never seen one of these before.
Your focus has been able to do it for years.
We need you to steal the Brontosaurus's soul.
Bring me pictures of Spider-Man.
Take this Sony Mavica and go out in the wasteland.
Friend of the show, Dan Cool from the Facebook group, said, Horizon is one of my games of the generation. As someone interested in the design side of things, it was truly a beautiful thing to witness. For the sequel, I just want more weapon and armor types and a wider variety of mount types. Also 60 frames per second because that game engine deserves it. And yeah, I think finding more ways to traverse that environment will never be a bad thing they could add to this.
And I think that we will absolutely see that in the next game. It would be crazy for them not to expand on traversal.
Yeah. Michael said, recently got the Platinum in Horizon. I loved most everything about it. The world and the lore in it had me hooked and wanting to find every collectible just to see how people lived before machines took over.
They drank a lot of mugs, a lot of coffee out of mugs.
Drank a lot of mugs out of coffee. The only thing
broke.
Yeah, there's a lot of
and
chips.
then society fell apart.
That was it.
Yeah.
Once you have to drink coffee out of your hands, you might as well just succumb to
give
robots.
Up. Yeah. The only thing I didn't much care for were the different trial challenges. I was enjoying playing the game my way and at my own pace. The trials made me change that and do exactly as the game asked. Other than that, it is a thoroughly great game. Did you guys spend much time with the trials?
I played a bunch of them.
I played a bunch of them, but I kind of agree. Like, I got to a point where I was like, I don't want to do these anymore.
I always understand the philosophy behind those things because it is trying to get you outside of your comfort zone of what you're sort of like ingrained into playing. Like every one of these games, I'm like, that's my weapon, and I'm gonna ride it out until the game's over. And then those kind of nudged me to be like, no, try this, play like this, play like this. And so I did learn a few things from them, but like, yeah, ultimately it kind of pushed you into a corner, and so I gave up on them.
Yeah, I've only really been chasing them for the Platinum. I feel like a couple of them are particularly tough, and I was looking back at things because obviously I want the trophies, and one of the major updates to the game completely hampered the way you could kind of spoof through a couple of the challenges, and so they actually became way tougher, but not in a fun way. Like, not in a way that made me go, oh, I can use that in the field. It was like, no, you just have to run from point A to B to C as quickly as you can and hope you don't get killed, and if you do, just restart, which isn't really a fun mission.
Yeah.
To wrap up, Busta Burns from the Facebook group said, I finally beat this game about 2 days ago, and I've had it since launch. After you recommended that everybody play it over, I started from scratch. Needless to say that I'm embarrassed that I didn't finish it sooner since I bought it on launch day. I ended up getting the badass shield armor and all of the lodge weapons and just breezed through the game. What I did like was the amazing graphics and fast-paced gameplay. I don't remember it looking this impressive, but I also didn't own an OLED at the time. What I didn't like was how long it took for the actual story to come to light. During the middle part of the game, it felt just kind of dry, but after you meet Silence, it really picks up pace. Overall, I enjoyed my third and final attempt at this game. Can't wait for a sequel, and hopefully we could fly across the map on Glinthawks or Stormbirds.
Hell yeah.
And yeah, I think we've all said, for as much as we're criticizing a lot of aspects of it, and as Max was saying, we really enjoyed this game. We've had a blast with this game and cannot wait to see where they go next with it.
Right. Also, there should be no shame in not finishing something you bought on launch day because if it's a massive world to explore.
Yep.
Like, I think it's totally fine to back away. Like, some of my favorite games I backed away from for a few months and then went back to, like Witcher 3, Metal Gear Solid 5, currently Bloodborne are all things that I'm like, no, I'm going to take a break and enjoy it later, Right. And I think it's I don't know, like, obviously I'm not going to review a game and be like, no, I'm going to take a break for 4 months and come back and 10 out of 10 or whatever. But like, to properly enjoy something, like, it's okay to savor it. And it's especially when it's a gigantic, sprawling world. Yeah. You will probably forget how the controls work.
Tyler, 2 hours ago as of recording on Twitter, replied to me when I mentioned we were recording this and said, I missed this game due to Breath of the Wild. Decided it's finally time to start it tonight. Can't wait. And yeah, there's no shame in starting a game a week, a month, a year, 3 years after it comes out. When you can make time for it. And it just makes me more excited having replayed it finally to the end of the game to see what they do next.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
So thank you for everyone who did jump back into the game, who's played along with it for this month. It was very fun to go back to this one in particular, and it was great timing for the anniversary. We haven't decided on the next game that we want to do this with, so please suggest some in the comments. PlayStation 4 exclusives. Some off the top of my head that I was thinking about would be Ratchet & Clank. Obviously, we'll get to Bloodborne pretty soon, hopefully. Ratchet & Clank, Bloodborne, on one of the Uncharted 4 or Lost Legacy.
We're not doing Bloodborne until you play Bloodborne.
I know, and I'll play it soon.
And you beat Bloodborne.
That too.
That's the rules
off at this point.
Yeah. Infamous Second Son. There are a lot to choose from, so let us know in the comments what you want us to tackle next, and we'll plan one for March and announce that probably on next week's show. But anyway, thank you so much for listening and or watching this episode and for jumping back into Horizon with us. And Guerrilla, if you're listening or watching, just just please tell us about Horizon 2 already.
Please.
We really want to play it.
Good start.
Something.
Normally Beyond is live every Wednesday at 3 p.m. Pacific at beyond.ign.com, youtube.com/IGN and your favorite podcast services around the world. If you haven't heard already from us talking about it, there is a Podcast Beyond shirt on the new IGN store, store.ign.com. Please go buy it. Show your support for the show. It does matter. We obviously, of course, appreciate it, but it does matter for what we want to do in expanding.
Every shirt that isn't sold is taken out of our paycheck.
It's
so please
true.
go buy as many shirts as you can.
My rent is due today, so please buy the shirts. But please go check out those designs on the store as well for any of the podcasts you may listen to here and more shows to come. But otherwise, without that, you can find us normally on IGN.com, youtube.com/IGN, and normally on Twitter, you can find us at Max Scoville. For Max, I'm at JM Dornbush. Lucy is at Luce O'Brien, and Brian is at Agent Bizzle. I always get tongue-tied when I have to go from at Luce O'Brien to Brian. And don't say it wrong, right. Double. But it worked out. Anyway, thank you so much. And as always, Beyond.
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 Beyond.